So a very good morning to all the participants who's connected here today for this session. I will start by introducing myself. I'm Elsa Gankou. I'm the Director of the Regional Department for Africa at UNWTO. And today, aside from the introductory remarks, I will also be moderating this session, which we are bringing to you at the request of our member states, and we will be focusing more on the importance of mobile positioning data in tourism. So this workshop, as I mentioned, is a direct response made by our member states. And today's session, we will be focusing on the tourism statistics with data from telecommunications network. We will be running a second workshop on the 2nd of June to complement this one. And this workshop will then provide insights on access to mobile positioning data. Our thanks and appreciation, of course, goes to all those who are supporting us today, in particularly Positium, who is an affiliate member of UNWTO, and today is represented here by Mr. Sim Esco, who is the head of sales and marketing at Positium. And just to recall that Positium is one of the leading companies when it comes to providing innovative data solutions and analytics from mobile positioning data in mobility, tourism, and population. And they have kindly accepted to accompany us in this endeavor in bringing this informative session to you, our member states. We are also receiving the good support of some key speakers. We have Ms. Esperanza Magbantai. She is the senior statistician at the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, and also lead of Mpd task team at the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data in Official Statistics. We're also joined by Mr. James Gabriel Claude, who is the CEO of Global Voice Group. And I will also go into the details of the other speakers as we introduce them throughout the session. Statistics, as we know, are not only essential to quantify the role and contribution of tourism to the economy and society, but it is also essential in planning and development of physical facilities and in marketing and promotion, particularly as we know now we're all working towards the restart of the tourism sector. And statistics, as we know, is about mobilizing the power of data to make better decisions. It is therefore paramount to provide data that is independent, impartial, and transparent, data that is also methodologically sound and elaborated with scientific principles. Statistics outputs have been elaborated to optimize relevance, accuracy, timeliness, accessibility, and comparability of the data. So why are international organizations like us, the UN, concerned with statistics? Because since statistics is in essence an agreed way of measuring something, it is fundamentally a consensus. The role of UNWTO is to collect, analyze, publish, to standardize, and also to improve the statistics of tourism and to promote the integration of these statistics within the sphere of the United Nations system. And here, as you all know, UNWTO is where we play the critical role in supporting member states in the setting up of the framework of the Tourism Satellite Account, as we know as the TSA. And we are currently working with quite a few member states on such an approach. However, today's workshop will look at what we do with data from the telecommunication network. And as you all know, mobile usage is increasing everywhere in the world, but also particularly on the African continent. By the end of 2020, 495 million people subscribed to mobile services in sub-Saharan Africa. This shows the importance of mobiles on the continent, and the possibilities it may unveil. As such, mobile positioning data can be used for generating population and tourism statistics and for measuring human mobility. In this regard, and also as part of the UNWTO agenda for Africa and the priority of strengthening statistics system, we have prepared this workshop, as I mentioned, as a direct response to our member states on statistics and mobile positioning data. And we know this is an essential component to the measurement and restart of the tourism sector. Today, as I mentioned, is the first series of the webinar that we will look at the potential and opportunity behind the use of mobile positioning data. We will look at ways of improving the level of tourism statistics with data from telecommunication networks by focusing on key methods and standards, as well as case studies in making mobile positioning data work for tourism statistics. I would like to thank in advance all our speakers who will be joining us today and the participants, especially for your attention to this session, which will try to make it interactive by taking questions from you in the chat at the end. But for now, I will stop here and invite Ms. Esperanza Macpantai for her opening remarks as well. Thank you so much, Esperanza.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to share with you in my opening remarks some of the work that is happening at the international level with regards to the use of mobile phone data. So this work that we are currently doing in the UN, particularly in the UN Committee of Experts, is particularly geared to the use of mobile phone data. And the objective indeed is how we could improve the different areas of statistics where mobile positioning or mobile phone data could be used. So I'm going to provide some introduction on what is a mobile phone data, what are the strengths and the challenges that one may face, as well as the work that the UN is currently undergoing with regards to the use of this new data source, as well as some of the key principles that one has to consider whenever mobile positioning or mobile phone data is being used. So earlier we heard already some of the challenges and the different things that national statistical systems face with regards to the availability and quality of statistics. And this has been aggravated by the need to produce data that are needed to monitor the SDGs. These data are particularly important because there are a number of data gaps that are currently existing in this list of SDG indicators included in the SDG monitoring. There's also a need for faster data and more timely statistics that will help us or policymakers to monitor where a country is standing with regards to their achievements of the SDGs. And of course, with the concept of leaving no one behind, there's a need for more disaggregated data that are currently needed in every aspect of this SDG monitoring. There's a lot of data that are currently coming with regards to the new data sources. There's a lot of new data sources, and NSOs or National Statistical Systems are currently faced in terms of how they will be able to use these new data sources. So I work at the ITU, and one of the key work that we do is to produce data with regards to the sector that we are in. So the telecommunication networks, particularly mobile phone, is one of the areas that we monitor. And so the latest data that we released showed that more than 95% of the population of the world is covered by mobile population signal. So this 95% is particularly the population that could access the internet, meaning they have coverage of 3G or 4G services. At the same time, mobile phone subscription is really on the rise, and currently in 2021, there's more than 110 people per 100 inhabitants that have subscriptions to mobile phone services. And this is not only a good development in terms of mobile cellular subscriptions, but also in mobile broadband services where people can access the internet. So there's really a lot of promise with regards to this data, as this has covered almost all the population around the world. So what is mobile phone data or mobile positioning data? So these are data that are stored and collected by mobile network operators that has identity, subscriber identity, time attributes, and location. There are particularly three types of mobile positioning data. One is called the detailed records, which are routinely stored and collected by MNOs for billing purposes. There's a passive signaling data also collected by MNOs, but the storage of this data is depending on the needs of the mobile network operators. There's active signaling data, and this data are also collected by the operators, but not necessarily regularly, as this may be opt out by subscribers. So I'm not going to give a detailed description of each one of them because this will be covered in the next presentations. This is just to give you an overview of what's available. But what I would like to stress is the strengths and limitations or challenges with regards to the use of mobile positioning data. Of course, the strength is this is a wide use service, so therefore the penetration and the availability of high quality data is widespread around the world. And this is not just, of course, Africa is also well covered with regards to mobile phone services. There's really high granularity of this data. And of course, data are collected real time, nearly real time, and generated already by mobile network operators. One of the limitations of the mobile positioning data is, of course, the representativeness of the mobile subscriptions, particularly because one subscription may not represent one individual. This could be a case in Africa where mobile phone usage is shared within a similar or one device and vice versa. So one person can also have multiple subscriptions. And this could affect, of course, the quality of the data that one collects. One of the challenges that we identified when we did a pilot on the use of mobile phone data is, of course, access to this data. We need to work with several stakeholders in the country, particularly the mobile network operators, to make sure that the data are made available for the purposes of the study. And so it's important that different stakeholders come together and discuss how this new data source could be used efficiently. Of course, this is a large data set and could require a suitable data infrastructure, and this may be a challenge in some of the national statistical offices. In the international community, the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics, which is currently being led by an advisory board and the Secretariat of the UN Statistics Division, is an initiative that puts together experts to discuss new data sources. And here, the objective indeed is to develop methodologies and share experiences with regards to the use of big data. So mobile phone data is just one of the data sources that we look with regards to big data. There's also satellite data, the AIS data, scanner data, and of course there are cross-cutting issues with regards to the use of big data. For example, we look at training and skills, privacy-preserving techniques, acquisition, so data access, and measuring rural access, and how big data could be used for the SDGs. So the mobile phone data is particularly one of the most important task team of this committee of experts, because it helps to bring together different stakeholders, particularly those that have experience in the use of mobile phone data. This UNCEBD is also available through the regional hubs. So in Africa, there's a regional hub in Rwanda. There's one in the UAE for the Arab states. There's one in Brazil for the Americas, and China for the Asia Pacific. And in these regional hubs, experiences as well as use cases could be highlighted. And this is where countries in the region can also work together with other stakeholders to make sure they will be able to take advantage of the different experiences and methodologies that are already available in that particular region. So in particular, the task team on mobile phone data, which is currently composed of more than 50 members, experts coming from countries, as well as international and regional organizations and private institutions. So you will see, for example, that Positium and particularly is an active member of this task team. And the objective here is to explore the use of mobile phone big data in different areas of statistics. We meet regularly, we organize workshops and international events with an objective to share experiences and methodologies so that national statistical offices will be able to learn from the experiences and methodologies that were implemented in other countries. And so we focus on 6 areas in this task team. The task team is currently divided into 6 groups, which we call subgroups. One of them is tourism statistics, currently being led by BPS Indonesia. We also have migration statistics led by Georgia, census and dynamic population currently being led by Positium, transport and commuting subgroup, which is led by the World Bank, information society indicators, which is led by the ITU, displacement in the disaster context, which is currently being led by University of Tokyo. So in particular, these task subgroups within this task team is are working on developing handbooks. And these handbooks will be very useful when a country or the National Statistics Office wants to use or leverage the benefits of mobile phone big data. So it includes methodologies into the different data sources that needs to be looked at with regards to mobile positioning data. There's the need, of course, to access the data, and this is covered in handbooks, the different methodologies on how these different areas of statistics could be calculated, and of course, the quality assurance with regards to the use of mobile phone data. So these handbooks are currently under preparation, and this is hoped to be finalized very soon and will be shared to the international community. So this is the last slide, and here what I would like to emphasize are the key principles for the use of mobile phone big data to ensure public trust. This is a paper that we published in the Data and Policy Journal together with the UN Statistics Division, Positium, and other experts. And here we look at the 5 areas that is important when using mobile phone big data. The first one is necessity and proportionality. So we need to make sure that the data, the mobile phone big data, is well suited for the project or for the use case that we are looking at. We need to make sure that there's professional independence. So whatever external influence, for example, political or financial influence there are around the use of mobile phone big data, this should be not, I would say, influence the use of mobile phone big data. So like any other type of statistics, the National Statistical System should have professional independence when using mobile phone big data. There should be privacy consciousness, so meaning the privacy of individuals, which is contained in the mobile phone big data, should be well respected, and therefore methodologies with regards to respecting privacy is important. There should be commitment to quality. So whoever is going to use mobile phone big data should ensure that the sources and the methodologies are well respected and made available when using mobile phone big data. And of course, international comparability. So the use of mobile phone big data is also subjected to international comparability, because in the end, what we hope to achieve is statistics that could be used to complement or supplement existing traditional data sources. So experts who are working in this area are invited to take part in international discussions, particularly, of course, the UNCEBD. And this is important to make sure that the methodologies and practices that are employed when using this new data source is comparable at the international level. And so with that, I would like to invite countries and experts who are interested in joining the UNCEBD, particularly the task team on mobile phone big data, to reach out to us and let us know if you want to take part in this international work with regards to the use of this new data source. With that, I would like to thank you. There's a link available here that you can check for more information about the task team on mobile phone big data and the activities that we are currently working on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Esperanza, for this brilliant introduction. I think you have also helped to set the tone for the discussion today. I see quite a number of our member states connected. I've noted delegates from Botswana, Mauritius, Cabo Verde, Sudan. I've even seen some experts who work with us on statistics in the member states. And I just want to recall that we also have participants following from the YouTube link, which I understand now is functioning. And as I mentioned, we really want to keep this open and take also questions or comments that you may have as participants. You can drop your comments or questions in the chat, and then we will take this up at the end of this session. So now if we move to the second part of this session today, which is looking at the potential of mobile positioning data. My mistake in the beginning, I referred to the CEO of Global Voice Group joining us, but we do have the able Mr. Laurent Sarr, the technical director from Global Voice Group, who will be making the presentation today on data collected from the telecommunications network, and then will be followed by a presentation from Mr. Sim Esco. So Laurent, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsia, and thank you, Esperanza, for the introduction. My name is Laurent Sarr. I'm the Technical Director of Global Voice Group, and today I will be taking you over the potential of mobile positioning data. In my presentation, I will be going over the relevance of the mobile usage in this mobile-first society, the importance of mobile data, and second, I will go over the data acquisition, how government can acquire this data, because Esperanza mentioned it in her presentation. One of the challenges government are facing actually is the data access, the data acquisition. So I will be taking you over use cases with government, with Rwanda, where the government is acquiring mobile data positioning, not only for statistics, but for other purposes, revenue monitoring, and telecom, the telecom sector monitoring as well. And I will be taking you over another case study, which is the one for Ghana, where the government is using this mobile data to fight against the spread of the coronavirus. But before going over the data acquisition, I would like to share some facts and some statistics on the relevance of mobile. Actually, when it comes to the world population, we are talking about 7.9 billion. And out of the 7.9 billion population, 5.3 billion are using mobile phones. And this represents 67% of the world population. And by 2025, more than 70% of the world population will be using mobile devices. When it comes to Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, more than 615 million will be using mobile phones, mobile devices by 2025. And sub-Saharan Africa is the world's fastest growing mobile phone market, which means government can leverage on mobile data, not only to have predictive analysis, mobility trends, but also inform policies and inform decision making based on mobile data. How government can collect this data? This is a crucial point because access to data is somehow sometimes difficult, and to avoid running behind the MNOs to get this data, adopting a data-centric approach boosted by technology is recommended. At GVG, that's what we do. We assist government to collect data for the to have oversight, to have visibility over key sector of the economy. We are talking about the telecommunication sector. We are talking about the financial sector. And with this data, government are able to have good telecom regulation, to have digital security, financial transaction oversight, and revenue mobilization. So it's important to monitor, collect, and analyze this data. And our approach is a proactive approach where we acquire this data. You're going to see that in the use case of Ghana, where the data was available for the government way before the pandemic of the coronavirus, and government was able to leverage on that data to monitor the spread of the coronavirus, and at the same time fight against the spread of the virus using mobile positioning data. So this data support government for and regulatory bodies when it comes to informed decision, as I said earlier. And how we capture this data, you're going to see in the use cases. What we do is we install probes on behalf of the government. We install non-intrusive probes to capture this data. I think Esperanza mentioned it in her presentation. There are 3 types of mobile positioning data. The first one is CDRs. The second one is passive signaling. And the third one is active signaling. With this type of infrastructure we offer to government, what we do is we capture what we call the CDRs, the call detail records. We also capture the passive signaling through the probes. So which means by having this infrastructure, the government will have visibility over the different transactions on the telecom sector. And one thing important is the privacy and security of the data. This data is anonymized. We're going to see it later. And this data is aggregated because privacy and compliance with GDPR is very important when it comes to the data. So what we do to get the mobile positioning data is to install non-intrusive probes at the different stakeholders and capture the data in a proactive way. We don't wait to need the data to acquire it, but we acquire the data for the government for critical purposes. We are talking about statistics on tourism, statistics on population, but we are also talking about revenue assurance and visibility over the telecom sector and the financial sector. So I will be sharing a short video of 2 minutes, which is case study for the government of Rwanda using this data for critical purposes. So I'm going to share that video quickly of 2 minutes.
Interestingly, public-private partnerships have been an avenue through which we've seen a lot of development and growth in terms of the contributions that have been made through these PPP frameworks. Today, when you look at the amount of connectivity or the 3G broadband and 4G broadband rollout that we've achieved, a lot of it has been thanks to the private partners that have been very open to doing business in Rwanda, but also that have been open to partnering with the government of Rwanda to roll out this needed infrastructure.
One of the partnerships that we've established among the private sector partners is the Global Voice Group, GVG, which supply the platform that we use for traffic verification, as well as to be able to see what's happening with mobile money. And this has helped us because it has helped us have informed policies and regulation and to be able to guide this industry in the right direction, because policy has got to be based on data. And through this platform, through this partnership, we're able to have data-driven policy and regulation for the sector. So this is a very valuable partnership.
So this is it was a case study for Rwanda, where a platform has been implemented in 2012 to acquire mobile positioning data for the government, not only for statistics, for tourism and other purposes, but also for monitoring and protecting the revenue of the state, for also effective oversight of key regulatory sector. I mentioned it, the telecom sector and the financial sector, and also for combating the fraud and illicit practices and money flows. And as said by the authorities in the video, building analytic models based on aggregated data and anonymized data is an important trend indicator and is helpful to government in their policy creation, in execution, and also oversight of key sector of the industry. But securing this data is something very important, and collecting it is something, but securing the data also is very important. And to ensure this security of the data, what we offer to government is to put in place a highly secure private environment to host this data, have the data sovereignty, and have full control of this data. And ensuring the IT infrastructure is aligned with best security practices and IT standards is also very important. And something key, I think Esperanza mentioned it as well, is the privacy of the data. According to GDPR, for data to be duly anonymized, the anonymization must be done in such a manner that the data can no longer be attributed to a specific person. So this is very important. That's why when we collect the data, what we do is not only anonymizing, but we go beyond that. We do what we call pseudonymization of the data, which is the process of switching personal data into an alias or pseudonym. So this is very important, the privacy. And when it comes to data we collect for government in proactive way, for telecom sector monitoring, for financial sector monitoring, for tourism statistics and other purposes, the privacy of the data is something key and is something important. So the first case study was on Rwanda, and the second one is actually on Ghana, because we implemented a system to collect data for government in 2018, way before the COVID. And with the pandemic in March 2020, the COVID pandemic arrived, and Ghanaian government asked for help to track the virus. So with the infrastructure there, it was possible to use the same data in proactive way and provide visibility over the spread of the virus and assist the government to track the spread of the virus. So what is this COVID tracker? The COVID tracker, and I have to mention that this work was done with Posicham. So GVG was acquiring the data, and Posicham was mining the data for this purpose. So I think SIM will come over it, because here we have two parts. One part is the data acquisition, and the other part is the data mining, which is very important. So once the data is there, available for the government, it's very easy to take advantage of the data, to leverage on the data, and offer the different statistics when it comes to tourism, to COVID tracking, and other purposes. So with this system, we were able to closely monitor and predict the COVID-19 spread, verify the compliance with public health measure, the quarantine and all of that. So it was possible after taking the measure to see the impact of the measure based on the on this platform we implemented together with Posicham in Ghana. And as I said earlier, how we acquire this data is through the CDRs, the event data records, and also through the signaling information. So by just installing non-intrusive probes that are not affecting the normal operation of the MNOs, it's possible for the government to have this data available for many purposes and critical purposes. So what was the impact? As I said earlier, the predictive analysis of the spread of the coronavirus to identify the population movement, especially during the period of lockdown, using mobile data. And with this mobile data, there is something very important, which is the cell ID. The cell ID is very important. The IMSI, which is the International Mobile Subscriber Identity, is very important, but I have to highlight that that information is actually pseudonymized or anonymized because we encrypt that information just for privacy. And there is the timestamp also, which is very important. So those are the key information we acquire. And with that, it's possible for government to have full statistic over the migration of the population and over the tourism statistics as well. Local tourism as well the international tourism. And with this data, there are a lot of usage that government can have with this data. We are talking about the migratory trend analysis. We are talking about the demographics management. We are talking about the crisis management. We are talking about policy planning. And actually, in some countries, like in Kenya, there is a project which is called Matatu. And with this project, government is able to manage the urban, the public transportation. And it's same in Turkey, where government recently launched the migratory trend analysis based on mobile data. So data is key for government, and it's important for government to acquire this data in a proactive way so that government can take full advantage of this data. So that said, I will hand over to Sim to take you over the mobile positioning data, especially for the tourism statistics. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much, Laurent. And indeed, data is key for governments, as you rightly said. And I see a lot of questions coming in through the chats. Some of the colleagues have already attempted to answer it. So if you read the chat, you will have your answers there. Another question that keeps coming up is about the presentations. I would just like to inform all those listening in that we will make available the presentations, and as well this session is being recorded, so you will be able to access it from the link through YouTube. And we will continue to look at the questions and also answer them more in depth at the end. But I also believe that some of the questions are addressed through the presentations that are coming up. And as I mentioned, this all started with the partnership that we have with Positium. So now I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Sim Esco. As I mentioned, he's the head of sales and marketing at Positium. He will be now sharing with us a presentation on tourism statistics with mobile positioning data. Thank you. Sim, over to you.
Thank you all. And thank you to the previous presenters, and thank you all for joining us at this meeting. And especially thank you for all the questions. Please send in more questions. And as Elsia rightly mentioned, some of the questions might be answered in the upcoming presentations. So I want to tell you. Sorry, sharing the screen again.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So what I will tell you in this brief time is to tell you about the role of mobile position data in tourism statistics in comparison to the entire world of big data, because you might have questions about how does it fit into other big data sources that we might hear about. And then how does it fit into our global connected world? What are the experiences in different countries? And maybe bring some of those experiences with you, to you through the benefits that different countries have seen by implementing mobile positioning data for tourism statistics. So first off, there are many different big data sources. So many of the sources listed here on this graph are not new to statistics, like satellite images, scanner data, and traffic loops have been used in different countries for a long time to feed into different statistics. But some of these sources might be more promising or more widely used, and others are included in this graph only to provide complete coverage of a big data world. So it's the assumption that rather than collecting data through surveys and other means actively, tourism statisticians of the future will actually be linking some of these data sources from various different sources into a modernized tourism information system. And this has been well established in the Eurostat tourism statistics discussion paper. Perhaps I can send a link to you in the chat later. And out of all these data sources, mobile network operator data stands out. And perhaps at the end, I will paint a vision of how it fits into to all of the rest. But it has been proven to be one of the best sources for tourism statistics, and I'll show you why. So one of the main things to note here is that international cooperation on use of mobile data is actually quite strong. And there are organizations like Eurostat, UN Committee of Experts, United Nations ESCAP, UNWTO, ITU, OECD, and even the operator's own alliance, GSMA, working to enable a world where we can utilize mobile data for statistical purposes. And this has generated many different uses. And here I'll show you one map out of two. This map is the projects that Positium has done in different markets, and many of these projects, including in Indonesia, in Estonia, in Oman, they are continuous production of statistics, and hopefully this will continue as well. And in other cases, there have been pilots and use of mobile position data as a calibration source. But the other map I want to show you is how COVID-19 response triggered the response in use of this data, because data from mobile operators is being used increasingly around the world. And of course, there were many challenges created by COVID-19. Some of these challenges still remain. And one of these challenges is related to data. How has the world changed? And it changed very rapidly for us. And how can we get good data fast that can be used in policymaking? And according to a study by GSM Association, GSMA, in 40 countries around the world, including several countries in Africa, mobile data was used for policymaking input during COVID-19. And increasingly, this development is led by not only mobile network operators themselves, but national statistical offices, ministries, and telecom regulating authorities. So we already know where MPD can be used, and tourism is just one of many areas. So there are spillover effects to other areas as well. And well, maybe in terms of mobility, it's important to understand that mobility is also important for tourists. So if you use mobile position data to redesign your public transportation network, this has spillover effects for tourism as well, as tourists try to use the same network to travel within your country, within your cities. Or if you use mobile position data to better plan emergency services and disaster management, this has spillover effects of how well your country is perceived and how well it deals or is able to plan for the adverse effects of natural disasters, for example. But I digress a bit. We are here to talk about tourism statistics, and it's clear that there is an ecosystem of different stakeholders that benefit from tourism statistics being produced from this big data source. So how it works is, well, of course, the mobile network operators have to provide the data. So the data is extracted and cleaned and anonymized and processed within some system. So let's say for our case, it's the positive data mediator handling the data and produces tourism statistics. You will hear about the method of how this might come about in the later sessions, but I want to tell you here about the benefits to the different levels of tourism stakeholders in a country, whether it's international organizations looking to get better data about tourism in your country, or it's the very local, the travel industry players and cities and municipalities who want to know how the tourism is trickling down to their special location. And so one of the aspects of mobile positioning data is that it provides trusted statistics that can be trusted to cover the basic statistics about tourism for the entire country. And the official statistics through mobile positioning data is being produced already for several years. And by several, I mean, in Estonia, the time series goes back to 2008. So it has been produced since 2009 until today. So you will hear about that experience also later. In Indonesia for 5 years now, and many other countries are using it for calibration purposes before they move into using this as the main source in their regular production. And well, why is it trusted? When you generate tourism statistics, you have to follow the statistical principles, the scientific principles, and also UNWTO guidelines for how to collate tourism statistics. And there are many different materials out there. I'll just mention one of them is the feasibility study done for Eurostat, where we looked at different methods used that could be used in different European countries, and how this can actually be applied as a manual for different countries. So it's a quite thorough book of experiences. Now, the central bank will tell you a lot about the benefits of NPD in terms of benefits for the base statistics for a single country. It's much more efficient to generate these kind of statistics from mobile data or other big data sources compared to surveys, as long as you can make the method work. So there are multiple benefits in timeliness, in sample size, in the number of different aggregates you get from the data. And something that is really crucial nowadays, especially when we have trouble getting people answering our surveys, is big data sources have 100% less burden on tourists who no longer have to answer the surveys, and the tourism statisticians no longer have to find them in the entry points into countries. Apart from general tourism statistics, NPD allows you to look inside the country as well and produce indicators that were not available previously, including, for example, how tourists flow through the country. So tourism flows from NPD often allows for new discoveries on tourism patterns that were not even visible from the statistics collected previously. So we're adding something into the mix as well. And since one of the projects we have been working on was in the Middle East, in Oman, I want to show you something about this undiscovered gem. So there are many different tourism regions in Oman, and one of these regions is beautiful. It's a rugged terrain, but it mostly attracts cruise ship tourists. And it was very evident in mobile phone data how it's very different how Germans behave in the statistics when you look at one area of the country versus another one. So here, for example, you see the area where you have a lot of cruise ships going in, and although it looks like the same as another area in terms of the number of people that you would have on peak days and at the start of the year, then these tourists, they come and go. They don't stay overnight. They're German tourists in both places, but the amount of money that is spent and the amount of enjoyment of the country, so what we really care about when tourists visit our country, that's perhaps more evident in the very natural area of Salalah in Oman. So NPD also does provide a better granularity in terms of geography. So you can zoom into the cell tower level and do statistics for that kind of level, but you can also map out the destinations in your country and see what is the visitation of these places. You can aggregate the data based on months, quarters, weeks, days, even hours if needed. And here I'll show you one case we did in Croatia, in the city called Dubrovnik. So this is a very historical city and has an old town. The problem is this old town is usually very crowded. So the question was, where do all these people come from, and do cruise ship tourists who come into the city actually spend time there that warrants their stay there, or should this be somehow managed? And it was possible with NPD to just narrow down the tourism statistics for this very specific place to 15-minute intervals and see how the fluctuation of people flows in and out of the old town, even understand where there should be some restriction on people to deter overcrowding. But what's most important maybe is that all of these small events, people gatherings in the old town were very visible through this data. So this is a Christmas period, and people have gatherings in the old town to celebrate a few events, and this is something that is very, very hard to do with other traditional sources. But to to kind of pull it together now, a word on cost effectiveness. So Indonesia, one of the countries that uses MPD since 2017, Indonesia is one of the largest countries of the world. So you can imagine that domestic tourism survey is a massive undertaking. So it used to take 8,000 enumerators across the country to do quarterly domestic tourism surveys. And while it took 2 years to reach the fact that they can now use MPD, now they do, and they're doing the same domestic tourism statistics with even more granularity and quality, but with only 8 data scientists working on this, along with other big data projects that these data scientists are working on as well. And they are using this data for their tourism satellite account. So add to this the fact that MPD has synergies with other sources of statistics, and there is no way around this being a very cost-effective project for the statistical office once it got going. And what about the future? According to some very prominent tourism statistics experts in Eurostat, Christoph de Munter, the future of tourism statistics might revolve around these new data sources becoming the traditional data sources. So mobile positioning data providing tourism flows, mobile money and credit card data or other spending data providing the spending, perhaps accommodation and small-scale surveys to understand the motivation of people added into the mix. And this covers a lot of the demand side of tourism statistics. So who knows what the world will be, but it's a very interesting world indeed with big data in it. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I hope you understood how international community adopts the adoption of MPD and the different benchmark use cases already existing and the benefits that these countries have enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sim. I think we do need more time to go into more depth, but it was important for us to have this first session. And I'm sure the second session will provide more information to our participants when we meet again on the 2nd of June. Before we go into the second session, we will look a little bit at the questions that came in, and we will take a break of 10 minutes and then resume for the second part of the session. I see quite a number of questions have been answered, but I keep seeing, for some reason, I think this caught my attention, a question on how can we trust mobile data? I don't know. I believe Laurent touched a little bit on this. I don't know between Laurent and Sim, if you'd like to just briefly elaborate on this, just to reassure the participants also that the mobile is important. We get a lot of information from it, but how secure is it? Laurent, would you like to take that?
Yes, yeah, maybe Sim. Alcia, I will take this one. So trust is very important in this environment, and trust is very important when it comes to the data acquisition. That's why getting this data in real time is something very important, because you make sure that the data is not manipulated, the data is not tampered, and you get that data through the signaling. That's what Esperanza mentioned. You have the CDRs, and you also have the passive signaling where you can collect that data in real time. So you are sure that by doing that, you are sure that the data is not manipulated. Another way of having trust on this data is getting the raw data, which is binary data. You can decode yourself and get the transaction and anonymize, aggregate the transaction. So that's a very important question, because to get relevant statistic, the data has to be authentic data, and getting this data in real time or getting raw files in near real time will enable you to have the certainty that the data is authentic and you can trust on that data to get your statistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. And I believe this also will complement the answer you gave, complement the other question that I just saw came in is, how do we proceed to ensure the quality of the data?
I'll add to Laurent's side of it, because I believe there are two different aspects of quality and trust. And one is that you have to trust the input data that is coming in, and this is what GVG is doing to make sure that no data is being tampered with, and all the data that comes in is you can trust that it is what it is. Then the other side of it is what do you then do with this data that's coming in, because you have to take that data that has been collected for other purposes and transform that into tourism statistics. So do you trust the methods of this data being analyzed? And perhaps Kaiser's presentation during the next hour will answer that question as well.
Thank you. I think just before we wrap up, to take that little break, I see another question from Hakim. I don't know if Esperanza would like to add something as well. It says, what main indicators do you capture with this MPD? Remember, some of our tourists will pay with cash, so expenditure data will not be easy to estimate. Can we have a response on this? Thank you.
Maybe, thank you for that question. Maybe Sim or Kaisa, who work on tourism statistics, will be able to answer that, because the tourism subgroup within the task team is currently under the lead of Indonesia, and I think Positium is also an active member of that subgroup.
Yes. So in general terms, before Kaisa and actually Janus in the next session from the central bank side tells us what kind of indicators they are collecting from mobile phone data. Then in general, it covers the flows and number of people entering the country. So the quantitative side of tourism statistics, demand side. How many people, how long they're staying, which places they're visiting. It doesn't cover the spending side or the motivation side, which are also very, very important. So that's why in the future of tourism statistics slides, there's no one data source that answers all the questions for you, and it shouldn't be. You should always have data that you can compare against each other. But yes, the main tourism statistics in terms of what you think of quantitative data, those will be those are possible to obtain.
Thank you. I see questions are still coming in, but because we need also to stick to the program, we had planned to take a 10-minute break, but I think we've eaten 5 minutes into this. So can I get a heads up from Sarah or Pai? What time should we reconvene? At 10:10 or 10:15?
10:15 then, okay? Because it's 10:05, okay, 10:15, 10 minutes, okay?
Okay, we'll take a short 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene to look at the session on methods and standards. And there we will be looking at some case studies, and I'm pretty sure that some of the questions you've put across here will be answered also in this session. But thank you very much. This has been very informative and interactive as well. So we will take a break. Please don't disconnect. You can just bear with us 10 minutes and we will come back at 10:15. Thank you so much to all our presenters this morning. So welcome back to everyone. And I see that everybody remained connected. So thank you for that. And we've seen in the first session that we do have countries in Africa that is already moving ahead with this. We saw the little video from Rwanda, and I understand also countries like Ghana, etc. But in this second session, we will be looking at methods and standards and have country example from Europe on the use of mobile positioning data for tourism statistics. And for this, we will start with Mr. Hannes Kroon, who is the head of statistics department at Bank of Estonia. We will proceed in the same manner as this morning. We will have all the presenters, and then we will take the questions at the end. So I encourage you all to put your questions in the Q&A, and we will try to respond as much as we can throughout this session. So now I give the floor to our next presenter, Mr. Kroon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for invitation. I'm really happy being here to introduce you to our quite long experience in using big data in official statistics. And let me share first my slides. I hope it's visible now, yes?
Yes, it is. If you could put it in full screen, it would be better. Thank you.
Isn't it full screen? At least I see it full screen, maybe.
Well, we can't see it in full screen.
Oh.
Please try again.
I try again.
Okay, yeah. If you try again, maybe it's better.
So it's the same, no?
It is. Okay, well, if you want to go ahead.
But I try once again, just there is one more option here.
Now, okay, good.
Now it's good. Okay,
yeah,
that's
perfect.
a difference between sharing screen or sharing application. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being patient. As I mentioned already, I'm head of responsible for statistical function in the Bank of Estonia already for several years, and one of our biggest achievement, I would say, during this time has been using the big data. We're starting to use big data so many years ago, so at that time we didn't know at all this will be called big data later. So we just used mobile phone data for border crossing statistics estimations. In my presentation, now I hope that I can move on. Okay, in my presentation, I just want to stop a bit on background issues, why the mobile data was chosen, about the motivation, about our cooperation with a partner who is Positio, and to draw some most important conclusions of this quite long period. And first of all, I just wanted to mention that Estonia is in Northeast Europe, part of European Union. We have only 1.4 million of people here in Estonia, and Estonia is part of European Union and part of Eurozone. And in making statistics, we follow all European standards and, of course, international standards, what is set for statistical data production. The Bank of Estonia is official producer of statistics. We are responsible for producing monetary and financial statistics, including supervisory statistics, we are responsible for external sector statistics and compilation of financial accounts. In addition to that, we have some more fields, but maybe regarding today's presentation and the aim, these fields are not so important. The motivation, why we reached to mobile phone data. In external sector statistics, the major product is balance of payments. And I think you all know that the travel services is a part of balance of payments current account. For Estonia, a small open economy, the travel is extremely important service, and we have to make quite a long effort to measure the travel account for the balance of payments purposes. For balance of payments calculations, we need number of inbound and outbound travels. We need to know the duration of the trip. We multiply the number to average expenditures of traveler. We add prepaid services and expenditures of short-term workers and students. The first part of this formula is border crossing statistics. Now, this is the key, why the mobile phone data was taken on board. 14 years ago, of course, the worldwide travel was already very important, at least for Estonia, where prices were much cheaper than, for instance, in Nordic countries. We have at that time already a huge inflow of Nordic travelers. Estonia became a member of Schengen area, what means that no border control and respective data collection anymore. Before a Schengen area, we had just regular administrative borders, more or less, and administrative data sources were available by police office. But when we joined to Schengen area in 2007, no more. The major part of border crossing data, administrative data, disappeared. In addition to that, Statistics Estonia announced that they abolished all border surveys and travel agent statistics, which were removed from statistics program of 2010 because of huge budget cuts, which was caused by economic crisis on this period. And we were announced that just only accommodation statistics was the area which was still alive, and we had to be very quickly find the solution to use accommodation statistics, which is not, of course, 100% of travel, or do we find some other data sources? And those data sources, those alternatives were on our table. The first option, the easiest option, of course, was to fund the surveys of Statistics Office, but the central bank cannot finance the government as the rule. That's why this wasn't the way out of this situation. The second option was to make cooperation with road office. They had road sensor projects, but of course the limitation would be just only the shortage in coverage. It would cover only road transportation, not sea transportation, not plane transportation. It wasn't good enough. And of course, as mentioned already, to use accommodation statistics. Those were not very good solutions for us, and more, how to say, useful sounded at that time for us using the debit and credit card data and trying to use the roaming information from mobile operators. Everybody already at that time has, of course, mobile phones, but major part of travelers. And why we didn't choose the credit card data, the main reason was that the coverage of credit and debit card data at that time was not so wide. Not all travelers have credit cards. And we choose the roaming information as a data source. As a key, and how to say, we can say we made a little revolution, at least what we were thinking. Everybody has a cell phone almost at that time. And what was the second very important aspect of our solution or decision? It was availability of potential partner. Tartu University spin-off company Positium. They already had at that time some experiences in urban planning and geo data with mobile phone information. We, of course, hope to get solution, to get the synergy because the Positium already at that time had experience in human geographic and data science. And we have had many agreements with them, of course, with public procurements. First, we started to invent bicycles, so-called, to create the methodology. It was a cooperation work. For inbound travel, the methodology was created in 2008, and for outbound travel, 2009. And further on, we have had many procurements. As our procurement law in Estonia, the length of one agreement cannot be longer than 3 or 4 years. So the last procurement was 2020, and happily we have had only one potential partner during these 14 years in Estonia. What about the workflow? How do we organize the work? All the methodology we have was created according to the generic statistical business process model. And according to different quality frameworks. We know the United Nations Quality Framework, European Statistics Code of Practice, IMF Weighted Data Quality Assessment Framework, and the ECB Public Commitment on European Statistics. There's similar principles in all those documents, what we had to take into account. And the generic statistical model, I think it's you all, I think, are familiar with it. Starting with design phase and ends to evaluate what we have got. So the methodology we have was built according to those sub processes. This slide shows the cooperation practice, everyday cooperation practice. The Bank of Estonia is responsible for specifying needs and defining the business case. The methodology is developed in cooperation with Positium and Eesti Pank, Bank of Estonia. Design and build phase were responsibilities of Positium. Monthly data collection from MNOs the responsibility of Eesti Pank. The Positium is responsible for data processing, creating all algorithms and using Hadoop as a software. The Bank of Estonia, again, responsible for data validation and analysis, dissemination, and of course, we use the data for balance of payments estimation, travel account estimations as well. So we got another statistical product thanks to that. And we started in 2012 to disseminate border crossing statistics on the website of Bank of Estonia. Later on, I show some examples of it. Positium is responsible for calibration surveys and design and build if something is needed to be updated. And of course, in cooperation, we fine-tune the methodology if needed. The economy is changing very rapidly, the environment is changing very rapidly, and the methodology isn't something what is fixed for all time. As I mentioned, the Eesti Pank is responsible for data collection. We have agreement with the mobile network operator based on law and statistics. Law and statistics gives us access to whatever private or public database or data source which is useful for official statistics. We forward raw data to Positium and get back processed raw data according to our methodology. Of course, we have to follow in Eesti Pank law, and we all need to follow GDPR, which is a quite key law or regulation in European Union regarding data protection. And Eesti Pank and Positium, we have a cooperation agreement in between of us according to public procurement. Border crossing statistics, what we usually monthly get from Positium consist of the following subcategories: travelers, tourists, transit visitors, what it's needed to be eliminated. The next presentation, I hope, will be a little bit more into details with these categories. For balance of payments purposes, we need to distinguish migrant workers and students and cross-border commuter workers as well. For data validation, of course, not all data what we get are not 100% truth. There are some limitations in mobile phone data as well, and we need to validate those numbers and correct if necessary. And these are data sources what we use to calibrate data and to validate data series. For validation, the major data source is payment card statistics, which is one statistical domain, usual statistical domain of central banks, credit card or bank card statistics. How to say, the dynamics should be quite similar to data series, what we get from mobile phone data. Airport statistics is available in Estonia, and household survey for inbound travel as well. And for inbound travel, the accommodation statistics is very important as well. It covers foreign travelers in Estonia who staying overnight in our hotels. But in Estonia, as I mentioned already earlier, we have a lot of one-day travelers from Nordic countries. And of course, in many other countries, Estonia is very close. We have very good connections. It's very important to get adequate number for one-day travelers as well. We visualize data, we analyze and compare data, detecting outliers and correct numbers if necessary. And for correction, we usually use, if necessary, the average increase or decrease of available payment statistics or other reference data sources if necessary. We go through all data country by country, we compare. Country breakdown is available for payment card statistics as well. And if necessary, we can use average data of the last 11 months as well. These are major rules what we use to validate data, to correct if necessary. This is our press release, statistical press release as appetizer for data we published. Consists of short analysis and visualization. It's a little bit animated too. And this kind of statistical release is what accompanying with all the statistical products we produce by Bank of Estonia. And this is the database on our website for travel border crossing statistics or travel statistics. We have a breakdown with 30 countries and some country groups as well. Available is a numbers for visits and number of same day visits and number of overnight visits and the length of their stays. And now let me draw some conclusions of our 14 years experience in using big data and our cooperation with Positium. What we would say the major advantages. First, very timely data. Actually, it's possible, of course, to collect data up to real time, but of course, it's not necessary if it's not needed. And we obtain data for T+25 on monthly basis in Estonia. Data are consistent. We always know what we get, what can say as well for output data. We hope output data are consistent. Mobile phone data has a remarkably high completeness and coverage regarding measuring travel border crossing statistics. It gives us quite good, I would say that we have had some problems with country breakdown, but usually it's very good. The coverage of overnight trips is superior. And of course, we compare it with accommodation statistics as well. But of course, mobile data must be higher than accommodation statistics because not everybody is staying overnight with our hotels. Some of them have friends. And it's very good data source to measure same-day visitors. And as I mentioned before, it gives us option to get some more detail in data areas, border workers, student, transit, etc. And it is cost effective. The organizing border surveys with having interviewers, it's extremely costly, and the quality of data isn't excellent anyway. And mobile phone data can be automatized. What means that not remarkable burden, administrative burden is related to. Challenges. There is no universal methodology for countries. And of course, we need to fine-tune the methodology all the time, re-estimate calculations, coefficients, because the market shares are changing, and there are always different developments in mobile phone usage as a widespreading Wi-Fi, etc., etc. And of course, we have to do everything in accordance to our legal environment. The impact. 14 years gives us very nice data series, I would say, in turbulent environment. There are economic crises, always there can be some budget cuts in somewhere, but we have had always access to mobile phone data and to prepare our estimations of data series, and no need for costly surveys. If necessary, we can zoom in almost indefinitely to all data what we have. We have a huge amount of figures, of location-based facts. And I would say, as a conclusion, the border crossing statistics is the most popular statistical products of the Bank of Estonia, according to the usage statistics in Google Analytics, what we regularly do. Maybe it's understandable, but as I mentioned, the travel is quite or very important for Estonia. Thank you for listening. And if you have questions later on, we can answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very extensive and detailed presentation. And as mentioned, we will take questions at the end. I think this was very informative, and it was good to have a perspective from another region, especially for our participants listening in. We will now move to the next presenter, who will share with us some key methods in making mobile positioning data work for tourism statistics. So Kaisa Wendt, who is the head of methodology at Positium, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me here. I'm really pleased to do this presentation for you. I hope you now can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Great. So I would like to approach this as I'm head of methodology. Obviously, my topic will cover the methodological aspects of working with mobile positioning data, but I would like to approach it from the more principal point of view today, basically to give you some of the core principles that we here follow, and think that if you think these things through, then you are one step closer to succeeding with your MPD projects. So oftentimes, actually, when we talk about MPD, we always, not always, but sometimes we feel that we have to defend this data source. And then when we start talking with people who are working with more traditional data sources, they also feel they have to defend their data source. How about these data sources actually are not opposing to each other rather than complementing, because we both actually stand on the same ground, and we both actually basically thrive for the common goal, which is to produce a timely, accurate statistics, which could be a very good basis for decision making. So here on the left picture, you can actually see our board member of Positium standing next to a pile of papers, which is a quarterly domestic tourism survey. And on the right side of the picture, you can see how the survey is currently being done. So a lot of the times with traditional data sources, we are asking the questions, if we could have more respondents, if we could have more coverage. And with these new data sources, we start to wonder at some point that if we could just dig deeper a little bit, because there is something that more qualitative aspects that we might want to know. So they can help each other out in this way. And now, tourism statistics. News sources oftentimes will give insights into tourism flows, or there is a very good temporal or geographical granularity, but this information can be seen as complementary also to the collected smaller scale surveys, which indeed can provide information about socio-demographics of the travelers, maybe the mode of transportation or means of accommodation. However, with new data sources, as you can see on this graph, we are able to cover more people. We can include one or same day visits, as was mentioned by Jaanus. This is an important segment here in Estonia as well. With the traditional accommodation statistics, this is not possible, but Mpd can help out here and help to measure these flows of tourists as well. So how do we keep track of all that? I think the most fundamental principle here is when we start undertaking an Mpd-based project is to understand what is the reality model we want to approximate our data model to. So in the world of official statistics, there are a lot of concepts, there are definitions in place that the methodology should follow and adhere to. And for tourism statistics, one of these reality models, if we can put it like that, could be the International Recommendation for Tourism Statistics. And actually, Mpd is pretty well able to cover a lot of these definitions brought out there in this handbook. And the next question, once we have really defined what is the reality model that we need for our project, is how our data model can actually represent this reality model. So what are these differences between the reality and data model that we have? How huge are these differences? How much do they account for the differences in our results? So also to understand what are we missing in this data model? So what can we not provide with this data? And not to say the least is what are we adding to the data model? Because with new data sources actually comes a little bit more than we sometimes want. So let's get to it and check this on example of international visitors. So there is a very good definition in place, who is international visitor or an international traveler. But with this definition, actually, we also have to think about all the other definitions and concepts that come with this definition. So in order to define international traveler, we must be able to define what is the usual environment of the traveler, or country of residence, or what is even a tourism trip in this data set, the tourist, the same-day visitor, or main purpose of the trip. So Mpd actually is able to cover most of these definitions very well, and it's proven to work very well. That the only thing right now from this list of definitions that Mpd is not very well able to cover is actually the main purpose of the trip. For example, it's not very easy to say whether a person, a tourist who is coming to the country is here for leisure, or they are here for healthcare services, or any other such a purpose. It's a little bit difficult with Mpd, but something that can be done with the complementary survey. And now to the additions. So we can't just stop here thinking about what are we able to cover with this reality model, we also have to think what this reality model actually cannot capture. So for example, here with mobile positioning data, accidental roamers or people who are present in border regions and accidentally use the neighboring countries' mobile phone operators network, they will appear in that network and could be potentially registered there as tourists. So this is not the case. We don't want to capture these people because they are not physically present in that region. So there should be a definition for such an phenomenon, and there should be an algorithm or a method that can actually define these subscribers and exclude them from further analysis. So another way of looking at the reality is not just the reality model as I described, based on some international standard, but we can think about the reality as general human spatiotemporal behavior as well. So human life is always continuous sequence of events and activities where we are always present somewhere. So the question is, how can the data model represent that? So location facts recorded in MNO's data are just a snapshot in time and space without duration of being present in that location. However, there is a possibility to algorithmically add this duration, to interpolate, to understand how long did we stay at home, how long it took for us to travel from home to work, etc. So we look at these data, check the next record in the database and check the time difference between this record, and this estimation can come from this. So there is a modeling technique to add this continuity to the MNO data as well. So therefore we are able to basically enrich the data to fill in the gaps where the snapshots were just not present. Of course, not always is this possible. If the period without any data gets too long, then naturally we also lose the confidence to say something about that period. Another very important aspect to consider is actually the principle of comparability, and several other panelists here already pointed it out. But let me look at it from two different perspectives. So one of the perspective is from the perspective of National Statistical Office, for example, who starts to think about expanding their statistical portfolio. So they initially think about including tourism statistics based on MPD to their portfolio, but maybe a couple of years later, population statistics is something they also want to add to this portfolio. So it's important to understand that these domains actually can be built on top of the same underlying methodology. So there is a core methodology for detecting homes, detecting usual environment, detecting movements, trips, and removing unwanted data. So this basically lies the foundation for the methodology, and everything else can be built on top of that. So whatever you decide to add after that to your portfolio is comparable to each other. So you can, compare the number of tourists in a city to the number of residents in that city, because the underlying methodology of calculating these presences and visitor classes is the same. Now about international comparability. As already was mentioned, it's not very desirable to have isolated MPD projects, because actually one of the things that make MPD very good is because it's universal. Telephones and mobile phones are everywhere, and these methodologies can be really captured or used everywhere in the world, making it a data set that's actually easy to compare once we really adhere to the reality models that we set ourselves to adhere to, and also really sticking to the methodological principles. So our MPD-based projects will not be isolated events. They can be used for mirror statistics, for other purposes, for comparison with other countries. So this is one aspect of sustainability as well. If you are really relevant in the international community with your Mpd project, it itself starts to sustain itself because the need is more widened now. And now to the principle of quality assurance. Quality assurance frameworks in Mpd projects actually should be looked at as overarching. They should be covering the data collection part. They should be covering the processing part and output and dissemination part as well. So when we talk about extraction and pre-processing, the main thing here is that since the underlying data source is also in constant involvement, there should be agility attached to this quality assurance framework. So whenever there is underlying or inherent change to the data set, your quality assurance framework should be able to capture and adapt to this change. So of course, it also merits for the good cooperation between the privately held data owner and the data processor. But all in all, this approach and this quality assurance framework should have the elements of agility in it. So when we move on to the statistical processing, we start to think about what types of metadata we will be collecting, what types of processing errors we are collecting. And also, we start to think about verifying our methodologies. If the underlying data set starts to change, what are the methodological changes we need to do in it, be able to adapt to these changes? And with mobile positioning data, we are actually basically able to define the minimal viable data set and that can be presented in the form of 3 dimensions, which is the dimension of subscriber, temporal dimension and spatial dimension. So this is the minimal dimensions that also the quality assurance should be able to cover very, very well. And then when we move on to output, then of course there is a lot of validations happening. How can Mpd be validated? So there are possibilities to do panel surveys, have a set of a number of people who are giving their consent to study their data, to use this data and their feedback to really dig deep into the methodologies, to really adjust the methodologies. And there is also a possibility to do this on an aggregate level, to compare these results with other similar data sources, mirror statistics, and census data, whatever is out there. We are able to really see if there is any kind of correlation, and if we discover differences, then start to dig deeper why there are differences, because Mpd also, since it's very granular, it's timely, and it's able to basically sometimes uncover phenomena that traditional data sources are not able to uncover. So a lot of the times here in Presidium, we have also discovered very interesting insights into what is going on in the country, or how people actually spatially distribute themselves during some specific time of the year. So not always is traditional data sources like the ground truth that is able to validate Mpd, but at least we can see similar trends there and do comparisons like that. So another aspect of data quality, as we talk a lot about the fit for purpose. So Mpd is already proven to be fit for purpose for many domains, and we talk here about tourism. But of course, it is important to note here that without good quality data, this fit for purpose for Mpd starts to degrade as well, meaning that to have this good quality assurance framework is of very, very essential thing for these Mpd-based projects. And of course, every Mpd project should also follow scientific standards and methods. And to conclude this presentation, and all these principles that I brought out here is some tips to how to prepare for undertaking Mpd-based project, is to start with really understanding and defining the methodologies you would like to use for the project you think would really fit for the purpose of the project. So this will basically create the basis for decision making as well. What would work for you, and any other decision that will be built on top of that actually can already start to consider whether this approach we might use really start to undermine the methodological approach that we define to be fit for purpose. So again, next step would be to start thinking about how do we define the best data model? What are the quality principles that we need to adhere to at the beginning of the project? Then again, start thinking about what are the differences. If you have already present some data source that you are using and you want to accompany it with Mpd, start to think about what are the differences. What is this that Mpd brings on the table and the other data source does not? What is it what we are missing with Mpd? So when you have this very good understanding of these pros and cons, benefits of Mpd, then it's easier for you to start steering this project in the direction that you really want it to go to. And all of these discussions, these decisions, and these understandings that you gain from these exercises, actually you can use as an input for discussions with any kind of stakeholder that you need to prove your viability of the project or your purpose of the project. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaisa. This was also very informative. We've just reached our time, but I would like to give maybe a few minutes to see if there are still some questions coming in. I saw that the questions that was put in was already replied by some of our presenters. So just to check, I don't believe we don't have any questions that not been answered.
Alicia, if you allow me, I just saw a question related to privacy.
Sure.
Maybe 1 minute I can address that that question.
Sure, because I see, yeah, it kept coming up about privacy, trust, all related. So over to you, Laura.
So I think we have to make it really clear and say that there are two types of mobile positioning. We are talking about the passive one and the active one. And for the active one, the active positioning allows to ping the cell phones in real time to get the position. For that, it mostly requires informed consent from each tracked subscriber. So for this one, the active mobile positioning, the consent is required, and that will address the privacy. And for the passive one, at GVG, what we do is we collect the signaling information in a passive way. So when you collect the signaling information, you don't have any access to the content, which means you don't have access to the, you don't know the owner, you don't have any information because it's just based on signaling and you don't have access to the content. On top of that, the only information you see in those CDRs, aggregated CDRs, is the IMSI, which is the International Mobile Identity, Mobile Subscriber Identity. So for that, what we do is even before processing the data, we apply a hash on the IMSI so that the IMSI is not visible at all. So that's the, those are the privacy rules we put in place to make sure that the subscribers are protected and subscribers are not tracked. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for the additional clarity. I believe if there are any additional queries or comments that the participants may have, you know, you have our contacts. Sarah, I will ask you again to drop the contact in the chat. You can always reach us and we can facilitate to put you in contact with our presenters. But as I mentioned earlier, we will have a second session in June, and it will help us also to prepare better in regards to the questions that you may have. So with this, I want just to close this session by thanking, first of all the presenters this morning for their rich interventions, contributions, which has been very enlightening. Even I had some questions, but it was responded throughout the presentations that were made. So I would like to thank, first of all, Positium, as well as the colleagues from Global Voice Group, the Bank of Estonia, and also our sister UN agency, ITU, who was represented here today by Esperanza. And as we have seen, mobile positioning data, we've appreciated today, is considered as one of the most promising ICT data sources for measuring the mobility of people, including the mobility of tourists. And as was mentioned earlier, I believe it was by Laurent's presentation, 615 million people in sub-Saharan Africa will subscribe to mobile services by 2025, which is equivalent to 50% of the region's population. And in Africa, people, as we know, we are using mobile phone extensively, not only to communicate, but to access the internet, to conduct everyday businesses, banking, as well as entertainment. And data and statistics, we know, have been found to be more important than ever for decision-making, in particular when data can be very difficult to collect. So I believe also that today's session has clearly underlined the importance and the critical role also that the private sector has in accompanying the public sector, especially governments, in guiding and strengthening their decision-making on policy frameworks. We would also like to thank all of you, the participants who've taken time, you've stayed with us, I see, throughout from the beginning. So we thank you. It has been very interactive, and we look forward to really receiving your feedback so that it may help us, as I mentioned earlier, to better respond to your needs in the second part of the session that we will run in June. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my team that has been behind, and also our colleagues from the UNWTO Academy for their continuous support. So thank you to all. I would maybe ask all the colleagues connected on Zoom to maybe put their camera on so that we can have a picture for this session before we close. And once again, thank you to all for your participation today. So Pei, when you're ready with a picture, you tell us. Thank you.
Yes, I need everyone to turn on their cameras, please. Okay. Okay, then, here we go. Smile, cheese. Just give me a second. Just a minute, okay. Okay, ready then. We're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pei. Thank you to all, and goodbye till next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.